Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. It's Paulie, Esther here, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about that Chapter 17 teaser that Dead by Daylight dropped on us on Friday, and what else could it mean. But first I want to give my wholehearted thanks to all of you out there who helped me close the gap in the race with King towards our competition to see who can reach 100,000 subscribers on YouTube first. I do believe that King is most likely going to win this bet, but I appreciate all of you helping me take a shot at it and see if we can make this race a respectable one. Again, if you're one of these near 700,000 people who watch my content in July but isn't a subscriber, I would appreciate your subscription to help me close the gap even further, put a little pressure on King so that it isn't a runaway race. Alright, back to the video. So over the weekend, some eagle-eyed viewers analyzed this teaser, and they were able to pinpoint the exact location where this teaser takes place on an existing map. And they sent me that information, and it turns out that this teaser takes place on the Father Campbell's chapel map. Many people call it the Clown's map, but it's actually a secondary location for the nurse and her lore. So I opened up the game with a friend and went to Father Campbell's chapel map, and sure enough, I was able to match up this corner myself with all the vines on the specific walls here. The pattern is exact on that corner of the Father Campbell chapel map. Now, what does this mean exactly? So there are a couple different things that it could mean. Sometimes Dead by Daylight is notorious for putting in these plot twists in these teasers, and initially to get everybody looking in one direction, and then it turns out that it's something entirely different. Spirit teaser would be a very good example of that. Oni not so much. I think Oni we kind of knew what was going on right away. But does this indicate that perhaps the killer is Father Campbell himself? Reading through the lore of the map, presumably in the words of Benedict Baker, it reads, "The familiar shell of the asylum loomed over me, but I found a new corner of these tragic grounds, a chapel. Once a place of refuge and solace, it too was touched by the horrors that occurred here and now lies ruined and decayed. I walked its tattered aisle and ran my hand over moss-covered pews. Echoes of the past filled my mind, of a father, a good man who helped the residents here, and who met his end by the will of a deranged mind. I saw a shattered confessional and thought of the comfort that it had provided to those afflicted by sickness and guilt, only to be rent apart in the pursuit of its occupant. That was a terrible night, and this a most tragic conclusion. I left this place, the weight of the past dragging me down almost too much to bear." Now, what we know of Father Campbell from the lore is that he worked on site as a priest for the Crotus Pren Asylum. He had his own little chapel on the asylum's premises, and he died inside its confessional, presumably when the nurse choked him out. There's even some of the nurse's add-ons in the game are taken from this character, where the dark cincture was crafted from the cincture on his robes. The Fragile Wheeze add-on is the whistling and rattling breath of Father Campbell. Campbell's last breath is an add-on of its own, his last breath before he died, and the torn bookmark is a ribbon taken from a sacred book. So these are the nurse's add-ons that are connected to Father Campbell. Now, typically, the entity grabs people while they're alive and well, or at the very least, before their moment of death, whisking them away and having them disappear into the fog. It would suggest here that since Father Campbell was found dead, choked to death by the nurse, that this would exclude him from that. But since we have found out that the entity has a multitude of worlds to choose from, I wouldn't say that Father Campbell is entirely off the board, but it seems unlikely that Father Campbell is this killer. So the fact that this takes place at the chapel, what else could that suggest? Now, in my mind, the location of this teaser still has me leaning towards the Alchemist, because we've seen in the Alchemist lore that they have mastered the void and the navigation of moving between realms of the fog. So the fact that this is on Father Campbell's chapel isn't that significant to me, and just reinforces this ability of the Alchemist to move freely among the maps. And there has also been the suggestion that this particular chapter will not include a new map. So perhaps the reason that there isn't a new map is because the Alchemist has shown this ability to go anywhere, so they don't have a realm of their own, and being able to just traverse through all of the entity's maps. So maybe this is more of a setup to show us that, hey, The alchemists can go anywhere. They don't need to have a map of their own. I do think part of the reason why there wouldn't be a new map for this chapter is because the team has been hard at work on updating all of the existing maps, getting them ready for this graphical update, and showing off some of the changes to the existing maps. So putting the alchemist in and saying, hey, he doesn't need a map of his own because he can go anywhere, it puts that pressure off of the team to create a new map and allows them to focus on changes to existing maps. Another interesting suggestion that was thrown at me, which would prove to be quite the plot twist, was that what if what we're seeing here isn't the killer at all, but instead it's a survivor who has been inflicted with the killer's power. The suggestion here is that during the blackout phase, when we hear that injection, that's actually the killer attacking and injecting the survivor, and then we see the survivor transforming here into this animal-like creature, which would be quite the plot twist. And I would suppose that this would have a temporary effect on a survivor, where they would be this feral creature that wouldn't have the mind to do a generator, perhaps. Not exactly sure how that would work, but it was an interesting suggestion. Another question I see raised is, well, if the alchemist is going to be the killer, then who would be the corresponding survivor? And I would just say that typically there isn't a relationship generally between the killer and their corresponding survivor in these original chapters. I understand there are some exceptions, so before you start typing out a YouTube comment, I know there are some killers and survivors in the original chapters who do have connections, but the majority of them do not. So I would just say, well, if we're already going into the archives and the lore to find the identity of this killer, why stop there? Why not go one step further and find the identity of who the survivor could be too? So if we go into Tome 1 and we look at the revelation logs of the archive lore, we see here in Arcus 1513, I have used the Orus to explore the memories of an unknown survivor who comes from a world where, from what I can gather, a cult for the entity exists. It's not a surprise, or the first time I've seen such a thing, but the memory suggests she was a detective of sorts, trying to prevent a cult sacrifice before she was snatched for the trials. I'm not sure what happened to her, and I will have to explore the fog to unravel more. So this could potentially be the identity of a survivor. So that's all I have for you today. I am completely expecting more teasers this week to shed more light on this upcoming Chapter 17, and we'll just see what it brings. But in the meantime, what do you think? Is there any significance to this Father Campbell's chapel map? Do you think there's a possibility the killer could be Father Campbell, or do you lean more towards my idea that this reinforces that it's the alchemist who has the ability to move freely among realms? I want to hear from you. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help me edge king in this race to 100,000K subscribers. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care of each other in and out of the fog, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.